All right, welcome to studies in Titus. We're going to be looking at chapter 2 today, and chapter 2 is divided into two main sections. The first one is Titus chapter 2, verses 1 to 10, that really focuses on instruction, and then verses 11 to 14, which really focus on uh, behavior flowing out of theology. And so we begin with verse 1. Uh, Paul has just warned Titus about false teachers who are preaching another gospel, and though they claim to be godly, they are not reflecting that in how they live, and so they are showing themselves to be false. So, in contrast to that, Paul wants Titus to teach sound doctrine. And really, when he's talking about doctrine here, he's really emphasizing conduct. And so he wants the older men to be temperate, that is, not drinking a lot of wine, uh, respectable, self controlled, to be sound in the faith and in love and in endurance. We see here that Paul is laying the foundation that he wants to see the church living out the gospel. And so that carries on into verse 3, where older women are to be reverent, not slanderers, not addicted to wine again, and they are to teach the good. So again, we see that Paul is placing a lot of emphasis on the need for a sound character. Then he moves to the young women, and we see that Titus is not tasked with instructing them directly, but it's to be the older women who are to teach them. They're to be devoted to their husbands and their children. They are to be self-controlled and pure, busy at home, and kind. They are to submit themselves to their husbands. These are all expectations of the culture at this time, but there's a sense in which this is universal, that women uh, uh, care for the home life, and that is a valuable uh, aspect of the gospel, that they are modeling this kind of love, and that this reflects the love of God. As well, from the young women, uh, Paul addresses the young men, and by this time he's kind of laid out the foundation that they're to be reverent and sound in the faith. So he just merely states that they're to be self-controlled. By implication, really, the other aspects that have already been taught are important here as well. And then in verses 7 and 8, he directs Titus to really make sure that he not only sets an example in sound teaching and instruction, but also that um, the way he lives, that he should be busy in doing good, showing integrity. In other words, what he is saying and what he is doing are lining up, so that they won't be able to malign the gospel. And then he continues on talking more about responsibilities, and this time more generally about how slaves are to treat their masters. Now, there's a bit of overlap here because obviously the slaves were mostly men and women, although they might have been children as well, but that what they are to do in that relationship is to be trustworthy. And by being trustworthy and by doing good, being good servants, as it were, they are making the faith attractive to their masters. And this is part of the calling of the believers. We want to not only share the good news, but we want to demonstrate the good news to others so that they will be drawn to Christ. And then we come to the last section of Titus chapter 2, verses 11 to 14. And really, this is a theology of salvation. The reason for their proper behavior is to be rooted in the grace of God, which brings salvation, makes salvation available to everyone. It teaches us to say no to sin, to ungodliness, to wickedness, in order that we might be able to be a people of God. He'll talk about that more in just a second, but then he says that we are to avoid evil as we wait for what Paul calls the blessed hope, which is a return of Jesus Christ. And in this particular passage in Titus, he talks about the great God and Savior Jesus Christ. And so, very much affirming a high view of Jesus, that he is indeed God's one and only Son, part of the Trinity, the second person of the Trinity, the Son. And that this same Son who was enfleshed in his birth in Bethlehem and lived as perfect God and perfect man throughout his life is set to return. And so he's encouraging the believers to put their hope in that. And then finally, the purpose of that too is that Jesus died and became our Savior to redeem us in order that we might be eager to do what is good. He is calling for himself a people, that Jesus is calling to us as individuals, that we might become part of the people of God. And what are the people of God to be characterized as? People who are lovers of the good, to do what is good, to love our neighbor as ourselves, to be servants, to serve one another, to show the love of God to each and every human being that we come in contact with, because we know that no matter how twisted it may be, there is an image of God in each of them, and they have value because they were made in God's image, but also because Jesus has died for them. And so that's just a brief overview of Titus chapter 2.